What's up, guys? Welcome to a broken episode. So I've got the R6 Mark II. I've done a couple videos on it and been using it a lot for wildlife and a bunch of other stuff, and I'm really loving it. There are a couple of questions that people have been asking me a lot that are kind of like the majority of the questions. Anyway, I said broken episode because I meant to do this like out in the field and do an actual, like, this part of the review out in the field, but I really re-injured my shoulder recently. It's an old military injury that has become much worse recently, so I haven't been able to actually lift a camera in the past week or so, let alone do anything. Even it hurts pretty much all the time. So we've got doctors and potential surgeries and all kinds of good fun stuff coming up. So I figured that I would do, because obviously I still need to work. So I have a lot of questions about, I think the two biggest questions about the R6 Mark II that I've been getting a lot, especially for the wildlife, is how's the autofocus and how is the croppability? I think the IQ and the croppability are that's probably the most asked thing. So let's just jump into the computer. I've been using this the past couple of weeks before my shoulder completely died again at Bosque del Apache, which is a couple hours from me here in New Mexico, and it's world famous for sandhill cranes and snow geese and raptors and all kinds of amazing birds for the winter. So I've been up there testing the heck out of this R6 Mark II, and I've got a lot of stuff. So let's just dive in and we'll go over, and I will, instead of just talking about it, I will show you how I feel about the autofocus and the croppability. All right, so let's just have a browse at some of these. We're gonna look for both autofocus and croppability, like I said. We can also take a look at some noise stuff if we want, but that's, I mean, people have asked me that, but you know the R6 Mark II is going to be incredible for noise, right? So here we go, perfect example of autofocus doing its job. Bird in flight, zoom in, 100%, looks pretty darn sharp. And looks like it nailed the eye, the beak looks sharp, everything looks amazing. So note the types of backgrounds too. So we have like the background is farther away in this one, and then we have like a noisier background here that's closer. Some of these backgrounds tend to be a little difficult for Canon cameras, but that is clearly quite tack sharp there. The light also plays a huge role in autofocus and image quality. So just note that, you know, having good light and good backgrounds and everything is going to help you the most. So here's one where it definitely had the opportunity to grab other things, but this whole sequence just absolutely nailed. I've already edited this image a little bit. I absolutely love this one, the sandhill crane coming in hot. It's pretty awesome. Look at this guy cruising right by me. So that's uncropped. This guy was really close. I mean, look at that detail. I don't know. Personally, I'm pretty happy with that. And I haven't even edited most of these. So here's this guy. This guy was pretty far away. As you could tell how small he is in the frame at 500 millimeters. You can also tell like it had some chances to grab onto other things, and it held on to him for this whole thing. So that's pretty darn good. Obviously I would not crop that. This would be an environmental portrait type shot, so I wouldn't crop into that too much anyways. I would just crop to composition to whatever I wanted. So here you go. This is underexposed ISO 3200. And it held on to these cranes pretty well, only at 1/125th of a second, so obviously there's motion blur there. You can see their heads moving up and down, but it did have focus, and focusing in that kind of light with moving subjects is not easy. We can see this guy here. right before he's taking off, and then this is as he's taking off. And I'm pretty sure that, okay, that one was, you can see it was a tiny bit off. But there, second shot, it's on. And then it just held him. You can see the one that I edited there. I'll come back to that one in a minute. So this I should also note is only on the not the high burst. This is not 40 frames a second. This is like the 20 frames a second. And we're still going on here. I mean, that was, so that was 31 shots that I took, and I kind of feathered a bit because of the buffer and all that stuff. But you can see the last shot in the sequence right here, and it's still just dead on. You can also see the quality looks great. So obviously I wouldn't use that image for the last one, but I mean, every single one of these you can see, you know, these sequences that I'm doing, and I'm feathering them, and I'm not using 40 frames per second, and that's just because to me that's kind of overkill for most things. Oh, I really love this one. So what's interesting about this sequence is these two birds, is you can see how they're slightly, one of them is slightly out of focus. So you can see this guy's blurry, and that's because it locked on to this front guy. And it held on to this guy without switching to this one, like for the entire sequence. So look at that, tack sharp. Even when this guy started overtaking him, it didn't jump. And I set it like that. I set it to hold on to a target rather than to jump around. So that's obviously what I want personally in a bird in flight shot because of this scenario. Even when this guy overtook his head, it's still locked, it's still held on to the initial subject, and it didn't grab the one that flew right in front of his face. So I thought that was cool. But again, I had that whole thing set up that way so that it does that. And look how far away this guy was, this snow goose, against this like crazy storm cloud. I mean, tack sharp. Obviously I wouldn't use that image because he's 9 miles away, but the fact that the autofocus just held on to him the whole time, and granted that's like a super contrasty, that's a white bird on a dark background with nothing, so I don't think it would have been too difficult for a lot of things to hold on to him, at least all the newer Canon cameras. Although my R7 does jump around quite a bit, more so than the R5, the R6, or the R6 Mark II. Here's another sequence with this guy taking off. So that was 46 shots, and every single one of them stayed tracking, stayed locked on, right onto that bird. Okay, so let's go to this guy. So I've already done some basic editing in there, but I just want to open this up into Photoshop and go through kind of a real world scenario for editing for me. So I kind of think this one will do well as a square crop. And I'm pretty happy with something just like that. So, I mean, we're talking a 32% crop here. And if we come in here, this is the important bit, okay? This is where people get, like, lose their minds over image size and resolution and all of that. if we come in here and look what I've just cropped this to, this is a 30% crop, and it still has 2600 megapixels for the height and the width. So for me personally, what I'm going to do for social media first is, and for the YouTube videos and Instagram and all that, is I'm going to come and resize this to 2160. Okay, so that's going to downsize it even more and sharpen it just even more. And then I'm going to save this image, and this is going to be my small social media image. But I'm going to tell you from personal experience that you can still print this image, you know, a very decent size, you know, a couple of feet easy. And 2100 megapixels is enough that again, but this is like a good light image, good subject image, clean. So I think something like this will print really well, even if it's slightly smaller. My point here is that cropping in on the R6 Mark II with its 24 megapixels, personally, I don't have a problem with cropping 30–40% and coming out with an image like this. I mean, we can zoom in a little bit more, and I mean, look at that. So you're starting to see the graininess a little bit in the detail, because we have cropped in so much. But I'm not going to crop in that much because that's not the image that I want, you know? You have to think about that. And to me, I think this image would look great printed even after I've downsized it. But if I were going to print it, obviously I wouldn't downsize it, right? So we can undo that. And just the cropped version of this now is 2600 megapixels wide and long. So I don't have a problem with that at all. And I think it looks great. And then we can undo it from, I mean, that's the crop, you know, that looks pretty good to me. So again, I mean, look how small this kingfisher is. He was really far away. And I really wish this would have been a cool shot that would have worked, because, I mean, it nailed focus, and it kept the focus as long as I could hold my hands up and follow him. Obviously, I did a crap job right there, you know, of not knowing exactly when he was going to dive or not panning fast enough, but nailed the focus. So, and then here he is flying, and this muddled dark background, and he's a dark bird. That should be pretty difficult, and my R5, I can tell you right now, would have lost it. And I can also tell you, I was standing right next to a guy with an R5 and a 1:500, same setup, standing right next to me, a friend of mine, and he has his camera set up the exact same way I do. We were both watching the bird, tracking it, and he just lost it. He just, every time this guy flew around with multiple rounds, the R5 lost it. It couldn't track the kingfisher when he was flying, because not only is these guys fast, but they're small and against this ugly background. And the R6 Mark II didn't lose him, and I'm highly impressed by that. I mean, would I use this shot? No, I would never use this shot, because unfortunately it's just not interesting to me. It's not what I wanted. But the fact that it held on to this tiny little bird flying through all of this brushy stuff. So here's another good example of croppability. So this guy just flying around, and it held him in the sky, and it held him when he flew through this stuff too. But look at that. I mean, that's pretty good. And I did the same exact thing for this. I ended up cropping 40% or so, and just a slight edit, and that's the image. Probably wouldn't do anything with this image other than social media, but it's fun. You know, the kingfishers are cool. I don't think, for me personally, not every image has to be portfolio or printable or anything like that, because I just love watching the birds and the nature and all that stuff. So here's a cool one. These guys were booking it, and this is already cropped, but you can see it just nailed these ringneck ducks, and I just thought that was a cool shot. It was pretty fun to watch and to capture, and it got the whole sequence, which again I'm impressed by. And again, this is a decent, 20% crop from the original. And if I come in here, and I've already downsized this to 2160 on the high end, so this is a 4K image. It's good enough for me to display on my 4K monitor, and it's good enough for me to put in this YouTube video, and it's definitely good enough for Instagram. And I think it's good enough to print to a moderate size. Again, that when you have good light, when you have good subjects, when you have clean backgrounds, it just makes everything that much easier to be right and to, to focus right, to look good, to be able to crop a little bit more. So you can see the rest of that. And these are just the 3 stars that I selected from the burst. So here's another good one. This guy is pretty far out, you can see. So this is also ISO 2500. And it was a little bit underexposed, so we can see the noise pattern, and we can see, but that's 100% cropped in. And then we can come in here and look at the edited version, and I quite like that a lot. But we can see, if we zoom into 100%, I've cleaned up the noise a lot. It's not completely gone, but I don't mind a little bit of natural noise to keep that detail. And I mean, even cropped in on this, which was already the cropped in edited JPEG, I think that looks great. And I wouldn't have a problem posting this somewhere or printing that or whatever. Oh, so this guy, this black crowned night heron, you can see, this is a good example of, this was underexposed, obviously, because it was getting quite dark out. But I still needed a fast enough shutter speed to freeze him, and I'm at ISO 6400. The problem here was it still wasn't enough light, so I would have preferred to be, so that's why you're going to see the noise there. But the noise pattern looks pretty nice to me. It doesn't look super ugly. But this guy, this black crowned night heron, it held him for the whole sequence. And this is a good example right here of the rolling shutter. So you'll be able to notice the trees are not straight, and they should be. So this is with the electronic shutter in the 20 frames per second, and there is a little bit of wobble there, so it's not nearly as bad as the R7, and it's a little bit better, I think, than my R5, but you'll notice it's not on every shot because these trees there's a little bit there, and they may actually be, I don't know if they were, slightly slanted in real life, but either way, this one looks better in terms of the trees and the rolling shutter. Now, would you have noticed that if I pointed it out to you? If I hadn't pointed it out to you, I don't know. Some people will. Some people care about that stuff, and some people are just looking at the bird, so who knows. Anyway, here's the edited shot of that, and I went with a less of a crop on this because I didn't want to exaggerate the noise and everything, but you can see if I do crop into 100%, he's still looking pretty good, and that makes me happy. All right, well, that probably went on a little bit longer than I anticipated, which is quite typical for me, but I hope at least that gave you a good idea of how I'm using the autofocus and how it's working for me. I mean, it has been the best autofocus system that I've had to date, and it's been better than my R5. It's weird because I used the R6 Mark II for a good part of the last couple of weeks at Bosque and up in Albuquerque and for really great wildlife. And then I went back to my R5 for a couple of days, and it just, everything on the R5, the internals, they kind of felt like almost sluggish compared to the R6 Mark II, which is weird because the R5 is no slouch at all. It's still one of my favorite cameras of all time so far, and it's incredible. And I haven't really had too many issues with it when it comes to wildlife and stuff like that. But after using the R6 Mark II, I can definitely feel the difference a little bit, especially when it comes to the autofocus. Now, when it comes to image quality, obviously this isn't a comparison to the R5 because that 45 megapixels is still there, and it still wins because it's 45 megapixels. That being said though, I hope you could see in my personal images that cropping them and still maintaining resolution above 4K has been fine for me. So I've been very happy about that. And you know, you just really got to pay attention to your subject, your lighting, your autofocus, your ISO. All of that comes into play when cropping. It all makes a difference into how much you can get away with cropping, and of course the megapixels too. But cropping in on a properly exposed, properly focused, good lit, clean, backgrounded, nice subject image is always going to be better than not, you know? And then the other thing is the whole, like, is 24 megapixels like enough for wildlife photography, and people saying that it isn't. Well, maybe there's people out there that just really are obsessed with printing 6-foot long images, I don't know, or putting their images on the side of their house or a billboard or something. But I just feel like that's not the case for most people. And that's not even the case for most people in printing at all, because most people these days don't print. And if they do, they're probably not going to print huge. So posting online, posting on your website, none of that's going to be a problem with 24 megapixels. And none of it's going to be a problem even if it's cropped in 30% and you're coming out with, you know, something that's 10, 12, 15 megapixels. I did use crop mode on a few of those images too on the R6 Mark II, and then just went ahead and, you know, put it in crop mode. And that's really nice because you have the benefit of the autofocus. You know, if something's smaller in the screen, the eye autofocus will lock on better and track it better. But then you just got to be careful not to crop too much in post after that. You know, you can get away with another 10-20% crop in crop mode. And I did do some of that, and it's okay. But then that is the point, because you're really reducing the megapixel size. You're really already cropping on the sensor. That's the point where you want to just be really spot on with your image, your autofocus, your light, your subject, the clean backgrounds, all of that stuff really needs to be on point if you're going to crop into something that's in crop mode on the R6 Mark II. But it is doable and it is okay. But I still maintain that, you know, megapixels are a crutch that people have become dependent on based on like the perceived value of megapixels and the just all of the media talk about megapixels and all of that stuff. I'm not saying it's not necessary. I do have an R5. I do love my R5. And even though the R6 Mark II is slightly better in a lot of ways, I still prefer my R5 for my personal, if I'm going to go out and not do anything for the YouTube or any other client work or whatever, and I just want to go out and have fun and do some wildlife, I'm still probably going to grab my R5. I'm definitely getting sidetracked here. All I'm trying to say is I love the R6 Mark II. I think it's the best value camera for wildlife that you can get in the Canon world. Well, obviously the R7 is the best value because it's $1,000 cheaper. But we're going to talk about all of that in future videos. I will do more actual comparisons and a full review of the R6 Mark II. But just from using it for the past month or so, just trust me when I say I personally love it. I think you would love it if you got it, especially if you're into wildlife, landscape, astro stuff, which I'll be doing with it soon. So if you guys have any questions about anything else that you want to see, like in the main review when I get around to that, leave those in the comments below, and I will definitely try to include that in the future videos. If you're still here and you made it through that whole thing, I really appreciate it. Hit that like button for me, because that's the best thing you can do for the channel. Check out the channel memberships if you're really into extra content and supporting me. I really appreciate all you channel members out there already. I love you guys. So that's it. It's tea time. It's lunchtime. It's icing my shoulder time from editing. So I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.